You are tuning in to Access Live, a show about raising awareness, what's going on in the community, and to address the issues that impact youth and their families that have serious emotional and behavioral challenges. We are located at the Brookins Building at 1776 East Washington in Urbana, Illinois, and at the downtown location at 202 West Park Street.
What I'm hearing from people that it's not just that a large number of people were elected to state houses and the House of Representatives and the Senate who feel anti-human services.
That's right.
But the pain in the heart is comes from the people who felt compelled to vote for them.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a little more sophisticated and complicated, but that's what the assault kind of feels like. It's like you have some neighbors who hate you.
That's
and
right.
that feels so it feels like a punch in the gut. So it's not even about the people, it's about the people who put the people in place that we get nervous about and we have to wrestle with, and feeds into what makes us as a people. You know, the show topic we're going with, the working title, you know, is why black people tend to shout.
That's
right?
Yeah, that's right.
First, it's a joke because black people don't tend to shout. but the story about who we are is that we tend to shout. But between you and me, we do get kind of loud.
Or I was thinking it was actually a double entendre, because it also, I thought, shout as in this way, but you know, we're going to talk about joy at the end.
That's right.
So shout in the other way.
Exactly.
So I was like, it was a nice little double entendre.
Yeah, we do like double entendres. So part of it is, it's a joke, it's a stereotype, but the other part is, today, the shout, the shout out, the pain that comes with how far will people go to try to hurt me and people who look like me. And this isn't something that we're making up. We're trying to have real talk about how real black people feel as we struggle with our mental health and healing.
That's right.
And so this conversation is kind of about an interruption in the healing process. Can you say a little about that?
Well, as you were talking, I was actually thinking about, you know, our overall topic is anger, right? And I think when I look at what happens and I follow the media and listen to the landscape, that people's action or inaction, particularly there are people who were mobilized on one side, but what's also heartbreaking was that there are a lot of people who should have felt mobilized to step forward and use their voice. I mean, you know, we're democracy, we're only 32%, depending on who's reading the stats, of people who actually show up in midterms, right? Like, how do you say? So a whole lot of people chose not to use their power.
Correct.
Right, and so that's as equally scary to me, because I think about anger, right? And so anger motivates you to do stuff, and so people who saw themselves as doing a protest or speaking out or using their voice or using their energy aggressively, right, because they were up against something. And then there are a whole lot of people who constantly feel silenced, constantly feel marginalized. I listen to people who said, you know, they're tired of politics, and they're, you know, they feel like neither party hears them and democracy wasn't working, so that's why they set out, or that's why they did this or that or whatever. So, and anger becomes paralyzing, right? And so, you know, so this election to me is a reflection of both ends of the continuum. People who were protesting and people who were paralyzed, and not like that healthy expression like, hey, I'm going to do something that's going to make a difference.
Exactly.
I'm going to sort of step out and feel like I'm going to change something, or that I can move the ball.
Right. Or what I will do with my righteous indignation.
That's right.
What will I do with my anger? So
rather than just be protest.
Exactly. So we are by no means saying that all black people are angry and we're just angry people. We're saying that we're living in a time, seems like an extended period of time, where it doesn't feel like the country you live in is on your side.
That's right.
And that causes a lot of hurt, real deep down hurt. And we know that in therapy, in the therapeutic world, you talk about hurt can manifest itself as fear, can manifest itself as anger, and so so the thing we want to make clear is when you're talking about African American mental health and healing, you can't not talk about politics
or oppression.
You can't, because you can if you don't want to have a real conversation about black mental health and wellness. But if we're going to have that conversation, we have to wade into those waters.
Absolutely.
Because they play so fundamentally in our lives. So, Karen, give us some insight on this question of righteous indignation, sort of societal rage, and how that manifests when we internalize that anger and rage, what it ends up looking like, and to the contrary, what it ends up looking like when we externalize that anger and rage. Say a little bit.
Wow, that was
a lot.
I know.
Sorry.
That's a lot of unpacking and sort of thinking about it. So, first of all, for we didn't talk about this last time, but for a lot of people, anger is a secondary emotion, right? So it is the thing, like there's a feeling or a need, and then rather than deal with that feeling or need, what you get access to is this anger.
Yeah.
So I could be feeling sad, or I could be feeling even excited, right? But what I'm allowed to feel, what I feel like is socially acceptable, is anger. And so I actually cheated a little bit and put my readers on because I can't see.
We just try to bring everything we can.
So I was actually looking, and preparing for the show, and one of the things that I saw that I thought was really helpful was an article on the Human Kinetics website, right down the street, and they were talking about how anger increases performance, right? So anger at its core, if it's done well, if it's constructed well, could be a motivator, and also helps you do things better. So imagine it can motivate you. However, when it's untapped and unfiltered, and it just keeps going on, then it impacts cognitive functioning. So then it actually blocks your ability to think well about things.
Yes.
So if you think about everything that we're talking about, the madder you get, the less clear you can think about issues. So that's when it becomes...
Which is why there's this phrase like blind rage, right?
Because you just can't think it through. And so that's just sort of so that's why they talk about anger management. And we tend to think about it as like not feeling anger. And that's not what anger management
is. A natural human
and
emotion.
a really, again, it increases performance. It can make you do things better. It's only not good when you can't think about what you're doing, when it's all just sort of feeling, right? So imagine, and we're talking about politics and global right? And so when you're thinking it through, when your anger fuels your desire to create change, to be motivated, to be impactful, when it's thoughtful, all good. When it comes from a whole bunch of feelings that are unthought, like you just are like, so many things are happening, and like things are hitting you, and it's just all I'm moving towards my gut, right? It's all embodied. That's when it becomes unproductive.
So it can be unproductive when we turn it in on ourselves, as well as the way we externalize it. So we could also internalize it in a way that can be helpful to us, and we can also externalize it in helpful ways that are not destructive to our personhood or other people's personhood.
So the language they used was, they talked about it being different forms of aggression, right? So it can be instructional, or it can be reactive.
Instructional or reactive.
So as long as it's instructional, it's going to create the outcomes that you're talking about. It informs your mobility and actions, right? Like, it's informative. When it's reactive, of course, anytime that we're talking about doing anything reactive, it tends to, right, we tend to be on the short end of the stick. So when we are using it, and they were using football as a metaphor, but if you think about it, aggression makes sense if you're talking about having, like, taken down somebody on the field, right? I'm not going to tell you, Karen, don't take that person down, think it through, negotiate when you're on, the yard line.
No.
What we need you to do is to have really great aggression to take down your adversary.
And what was that I remember as a teenager? Hit him again, harder.
That's right. So
when we get that out in the real world, it's like, whoa, wait a minute, this isn't the football field.
That's right. But imagine, though, if you know you're trying to get a desired outcome, it makes sense to use your aggression to move the finish line, to get to that in. Now, when you're reactive, when somebody's pissed you off, or when something bad has happened and you're just sort of being aggressive in response, you're not thinking it, there's no outcome, there's no plan, you're just sort of feeling, right? And I think that that's the bottom line. Like, anytime we're just sort of going guttural and there's no thinking to it, we're probably in a danger zone. We're probably not using our anger well. And so, what we want for, again, African American people, we don't want the blow up explosions, but we don't want you not feeling at all.
Don't be silent.
We don't want numb.
Numb.
We don't want you numb. We don't want you numb. Or numbing.
Yes.
Numb and numbing. Right. Numb and
people,
or numbing yourself, right?
Like dumb and dumber, numb and
number. Right. We do not want you, like, using drugs and and all those things so that you don't feel the feelings.
That's what can happen when we internalize this anger. It may then manifest as depression, right? We've got a lot. Would you say we have a lot of undiagnosed depression?
Absolutely. And it also manifests as substance use.
Right. Because that's all self-injured.
That's right. And it's a way of sort of saying, I can't deal with the feelings that are coming, or I don't have a way to feel like I have power and agency in my life.
Yes.
Right? So sometimes, right?
It is. And that's why in this show we talk about mental health and healing in the broad brushstrokes. We're not just talking to therapists here. We're just not talking doctor talk.
That's right.
We're talking real talk to real people, because there is this. Folks, we're going to have to take a break, and so stay with us, because we're gonna dive a little deeper. When we come back, we're going to talk about what we can do with this anger, how to deal with it when it's internalized, externalized. And here's the big thing: don't you hate it when people try to make you think you're crazy? Yeah. We'll talk about that right after this.
The Access Initiative mission is to build a trauma and justice-informed system of care designed to create a healed community that works to ensure that youth and their families are resilient, resourceful, responsible, and restored.
And we're back. This is Imani Bazzell, your host for Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. Today we are continuing with our series on anger. I promise you we're going to talk about anger and violence, which is what we said today was about. Certainly we've taken a little bit of a turn, though it's all connected, since the election was yesterday, and the turnout of the elections have far-reaching implications for African Americans' mental health and healing as well as our very physical, fundamental well-being. We have in the studio with us today Miss Karen Crawford Sims, who is a coordinator with the Access Initiative responsible for wraparound services and training and technical assistance. You can give us a call anytime you're ready at 359-9227. Tell us what you think about what we're talking about. Bring up something else. Anger and violence. When is anger okay? When is it not okay? 359-9227. Karen, when we went to break, I was raising this question about when people try to make you think you crazy, right? You said, well, is it me? Right? Because they keep telling us, you know, why are they so angry, or why are black people so this and that? And so you start to wonder, you know, is there something intrinsically wrong with me and intrinsically wrong with African Americanness? What's your response?
So, you know, that goes back to our conversation last week. I mean, some of that's just all racism, you know, so that certain facial expressions, tones of voice, intonations, body movements, just people project that that's anger, and it may or may not be anger, right? Like, it just might be something else, and people have decided, right, like based on racism, that anything that looks emotional or impassioned is primitive and therefore bad, right? So there's that. So, however, there's the, you know, I think as a people, as a community, as a culture, people are uncomfortable with anger, at any form. Anger, except, right, anger is one of those emotions that people are fearful of because so often it's done poorly, right? People tend to not have good skills around communicating, talking about it. One of the things I was reading in the car when I was sitting there was just like, so, you know, one of the questions was, hey, when you're feeling angry or you realize someone's anger, should you give them space? And the recommendation is, not necessarily.
I believe
it was that what you probably need to do is to have the person or have the ability to say, I am angry because, right? And I was thinking how powerful it would be if we lived in a world where you could just be out loud and open about the fact that, hey, I'm hurt, or I'm angry because, or I'm feeling these things,
and I'm not
rather than
because I get to express it, and then I can move on.
That's right. Rather than being like, we can't talk about it, or you have to calm down, or I'm going to wait until you have processed it, and you can use like words that aren't angry words or feeling words, and we can be, and I was like, wow, it would be so healing and restorative. So the am I crazy means really it's a way of deflecting. It's like, I don't have to talk about feelings because feelings are messy, and you might actually say something in a feeling conversation that makes me feel uncomfortable or that I have some responsibility for, and so and it's a way of you know, I was also thinking the am I crazy, if you think about the power and control wheel, is a way of taking control, right? It's a way of being disempowering, because I'm saying that whatever you have going on that I can see, there's something wrong with it, so I'm going to take away your power, and I'm going to silence you, which you know inherently is going to make you feel powerless. And what we know about when you feel powerless, then it's so easy to not, right? The more that gets reinforced, the more you want to sort of act, the more you want to act out. So like how long can people have you oppressed?
And I'm going to deny that that's what I'm actually doing.
That's right.
So we said,
and it's also invisible, which is so amazing.
So again, folks, what we try to do with this show is to make the invisible visible, right? So that's one way that we're trying to do that today. And we also want to remind everyone that we're wanting to weave into this series the question of vulnerability. What role does vulnerability or the fear of vulnerability play? If we could embrace vulnerability, what could it look like? One of the main vulnerability researchers we've mentioned is Brene Brown, and I happen to have her one of her series playing in my car right now.
Wow.
And she talks about, I never saw this. I always knew the phrase and I knew what it meant, but there's a lot of old movies I haven't seen. So she refers to the term gaslighting. And it's from an old movie. I want to say she says it's with Bogart, and when she says, let me tell you how old it is, Angela Lansbury is 21 years old in this movie. Right. And they are trying to make his wife think she's crazy. They're trying to convince her she's crazy. So they'll do something. And she'll say, oh, what was that? Oh, honey, do you need to lay down? You know, that didn't happen. And right. So they're doing all these things again, convincing her that she's crazy. And that happens a lot as she's talking about in domestic violence circles. As we look at domestic violence and the cycle of violence. Right. And one of the things that people in the field of domestic violence talk about is this act of gaslighting. That's right. Women who are caught in that vicious battering cycle that oftentimes the partner does things like that. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit. Well, you know, background.
No, I just want to, so it's just, again, another form of being disempowered. Yeah. And so when I can take away your feelings of power, when I can take away power in all kinds of ways, financial, mental, emotional, right? I can do that and then make you feel like that it's your fault, or that you caused it, or that you really didn't lose it, or that you were wrong. Right?
And the more you find yourself apologizing for getting beat up.
That's right, or being abused, or believing that, or believing, or or I'm gonna say something, but or believing that you deserve it.
Absolutely.
And that you start believing the lies about you. So, right, power and control. Yes. Power and control, yes. That cycle of power. And, what we want is something different for people, right? We want people to feel like they have equity. Yes. And to feel like they can respond to things in a powerful way, which means that they are financially secure. That's and right. Mentally secure, right? Like all the things that we want means that you can tell people when you're mad, and there's space in the universe for that to happen, right? When we talk about being trauma informed,
that's right.
And that we can talk about you being mad and stay in relationship.
Yes.
Right, which is what healthy expressions
right.
that we can talk about the feel and we could still live to I always say live to fight another day. That's right? Exactly because that's what a healthy relationship does. That's what healthy systems do. That you can be angry and whatever, you do it well, we could talk about feelings, accept responsibility, and we could keep playing it forward.
That's right. So
and this and unfortunately, right, we just if we don't live. We have somehow moved away from that as a goal.
Yes.
Yeah, we have somehow moved away from having space and place for people to feel like they have voice.
Yes.
We continue to marginalize folks in ways that are frightening. I think I've mentioned my dad before. Civil rights activist. You could search for him. He was very, very involved in Freedom Summer. Did lots and lots of stuff. But he frequently writes, and until last night, this morning, I don't think I got it. When he writes, and I get so pissed off. All right, I thought the work that I did for civil rights was in vain. Like it's a waste. And he's like, and actually earlier in the day, yesterday, he wrote, as he was sort of listening to things come in, sacrificing the sacrifices people made, life, limb, the things they gave up, given the voter turnout, makes him feel like it wasn't worth it. And again, my knee-jerk reaction is to get angry at him. And you know better, right? You've got 4 daughters who all are successful, college grad, master's degrees, vice presidents of stuff. Like, how could you say the civil rights movement didn't work? But for him, it's about creating access to power.
Yes.
It wasn't just about giving his access, because he always believed that we were going to have ours.
Sure.
But what he was trying to do, everybody, it was supposed to be a more democratic country.
Yes, because often it's talked, the way that it's discussed is this idea of, working hard enough to sort of pry a door or a window open and get as many people to run through as possible before it slams shut again. That's kind of what happens, and we're supposed to celebrate that, but that really wasn't the goal.
That wasn't the vision.
It was for the doors and windows to stay open.
That's right.
Not to pry them open for just a few seconds, and then we say, oh, look at all the successful black people.
And not just for the 10%.
Right.
It was supposed to be wide open for everybody.
For everybody. And you realized at some point you needed to give him the space to feel angry and to feel hurt and to say those things, knowing that he was bright enough to process through them, and if he wasn't, you would process him through them so he could get to the other side.
Absolutely.
But he did have the right to have those feelings in that moment.
And to feel really hurt.
Absolutely. So, we talked also about part of our hurt and frustration as human rights workers, human service workers, community activists, what have you, is that we know what's really going on in terms of public policy and practice that keeps African American people in place.
That's right.
In place in places we should not be, emotionally as well as physically. But oftentimes where we are, instead of expressing our anger from the grassroots level at who's got their foot on my neck, oftentimes the anger gets manifested in who she thinks she's looking at. Talk a little bit about that.
That's right. So I was just saying, it would have been great to think about everybody who feels slighted in some sort of interpersonal way. All of those Facebook, looking at each other, interactions that happen in parking lots, it would have been great for people to really talk about where the oppression happens.
Yeah.
And it feels so, I think, I was saying to you during the break, I think it has to do with power. People believe, for a lot of real interesting reasons, that the only power they have is their square or their 2 blocks. So when we talked this summer about community violence, right? Yeah. If you believe that all you can control is your corner, your block, your 2 blocks, and you really don't believe that you have a place bigger at the table, right? And so that's why you fight for your 2 blocks or your reputation or for your clothes or for your shoes or whatever, rather than, it would have been amazing if all those people who feel like they don't have a seat or they don't have a voice or they're not heard or seen could have used that and realized where they could have been seen at. And it would have been great, like, imagine being seen. We talked about Ferguson, right? Like, imagine people waking up and saying, hey, we're here. Yeah. But not real. I wonder how many people went out and voted. I know a lot of people registered in Ferguson, but I wonder how many people took that feeling of, I want things to be different, seen me, and said, if I change the policies, procedures, and practices, right? If I drive that, my life will change. And
that's what the goal is. So what we're talking about is the extent to which we have misplaced anger and aggression, either turned on ourselves or turned on our neighbors.
That's right.
And that only moves us back further and further.
And it's also really, what's so insidious about that process is, if you think about it from a sort of a macro analysis about power, if folks are so busy fighting for crumbs and believing that's all they get, like you're in the, for lack of a better word, right, you're in the ghetto, and that's you fight for territory in the ghetto, that's the best you can hope for. You don't even realize, first of all, people are complaining about all the things that they haven't gotten under Obama, like them or not. What we know in terms of the numbers, rich people have gotten richer, right? Right, and are getting paid hand over foot, right? Like, are doing so well.
Absolutely.
And we're so busy fighting for crumbs, we're not even, no lens that there's a whole bunch of surplus that we're not getting access to, and we're letting people cut us off by not asking for it. We're like, oh well, yeah, they've taken away our access to this, and this. They've cut this, and this. But that's just the nature of how things are, without realizing that you deserve more, and that if you did something about it, Paul Wellstone used to say that we weren't gonna get that until he said, again, I'm not recommending this is not access, but he believed that the powers that be were so sophisticated in their skills that we were going to have major long-term civil unrest in order to unbalance, to right the power structure. And I'm always like, I'm constantly nonviolent from the little, and I'm like, Paul Wellstone would say that, and I'd be like, oh, we're gonna educate people, and they're gonna come to and we're just gonna, and Paul would be like, Karen, like, for real, like, wake up, like.
And you all will remember that Paul Wellstone was a senator from Minnesota, who was very progressive, and he was killed in a plane crash, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That people believe that.
Right, and many people actually believe that was not an accident.
Yeah, because he was one of the biggest progressive at the time. Progressive voice. Was behind Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign. He did the whole Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and got. Which Jackson took. Helped create that base, which led open the door for Obama.
This was a white guy.
White guy.
And we really want people to understand. We talk about race. We talk about race a lot. We must do that, but we must always be clear. We're talking about ourselves and our allies. Yeah. We don't just want what we want just for black people.
Oh, next. First of all, there's no way that could happen.
Right. And who wants that? But we know
what paradigm would that be, right?
Yeah, but we know that all people can play a role in decolonizing other people's existence. So we're going to have to take another break, and when we come back, we're going to have some real talk about the role the media plays in determining how we see and analyze the world. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Access Live can be heard every Wednesday afternoon from 2 to 3 p.m. on WBCP 1580 AM in Champaign-Urbana. You can learn more about the Access Initiative by visiting their website at www.access-initiative2.org.
And we're back. This is Imani Bazzell, host for Access Live, a community education and engagement initiative of the Access Initiative. I'm so happy to have in the studio with me today a partner in crime, Miss Karen Crawford Sims, who serves as a coordinator with the Access Initiative for wraparound services and training and technical assistance. We are talking about anger today. You know that this is a part of a series we are doing that will slowly progress from anger to forgiveness to joy and happiness. But it is a circuitous route, may I say. With all
the public events that are happening. If we could do the series in isolation, tape it and be like, I don't care what happens in the context of the world.
That's right. So, and one of the things I want to say is, if you're really interested, and I have heard from people that you are, we want to redo this live and in color, meaning we want to take what we're doing with this series on radio and do it for real as community workshops. If you're interested in that, you should let us know. It's not too late to give us a call today at 359-9227. We're talking about anger, why black people appear to be angry all the time. We're talking about historical trauma being at the root of a lot of what has us angry, current realities that haven't changed that keep us angry. But we're also talking about our ability to manage that anger, not to repress it, not to suppress it, but what do we do with it when we have righteous anger? Sometimes our anger is not righteous. it is oftentimes misplaced.
That's right.
Is a lot of what we talked about. But we would be remiss if we did not bring up the topic of Ferguson here in a conversation about anger and violence, because it's what's on a lot of people's minds. That grand jury decision is going to come down soon. And everybody's wondering, what will black people do in Ferguson? What will black people do across the country? Are we going to see a repeat of the aftermath of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Karen, what are your thoughts about this question that's on people's minds and where different people fall on the spectrum of what should happen? Another big one.
I know. I know. So the question is location. What should happen, and again, the big question of what should is, in an ideal world, philosophically, again, I don't know the ins and outs of exactly what happened, but just on the outs, everybody who stands for justice should feel a sense of angst, dis-ease about a verdict that looks like, in any verdict that looks like you can, that it is okay to shoot unarmed black boys and men in this country
with impunity.
With impunity, multiple times, and we
of course it's not just about her,
and it's not, and it's not. We all know it's not a new story, and it's not just that story. But when you look at the issues of institutionalized oppression that are related to Ferguson, how people were disenfranchised from the political system, the economic system, the voting system, the police force, right? Like just like policy after policy after policy, like that's such a shining example about what happens when oppression just gets so systemic. And so we would hope that people who believe in justice or want fairness, and that's for anybody, would feel a sense of unease and would want to change policies that promote those kind of practices. And the unease probably would look like, right, like a little bit of discontent, some not just sadness, but some disappointment, frustration, anger, all legit. And there are lots of legitimate ways to express that anger. And we talked about, we want them to be intentionally aggressive, thoughtful, planful, deliberative, focused on an outcome, focused on a goal, focused on a destination, not just reactive, where we get caught up, where we're, like, the joke is every time people are burning down their own homes, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. Right. That doesn't get you your chosen outcomes. No. It doesn't work on any level, right? Politically, nowhere. Media, personally.
Two things. One is, don't think they're not gunning for us. Right?
Oh yeah, they've been
very clear about all the new toys they've got in St. Louis County,
all
and
the right
Ferguson
gear
in particular. That it almost feels like there's an invitation to rebel in a violent way, because we sure would like to use these toys, and we're going to have every reason to be able to do that. So that's one part of the argument, that people feel that people in Ferguson and who care about Ferguson are sort of being set up for slaughter. That is the feeling in many people's minds. And so then there are these efforts to promote peace. And so how do you bring some balance to, we want to promote peace and forward thinking and change, with some real anger and righteous indignation? So it's like, if we do go off, what does it say about us? And if we don't go off, what does it say about us?
So that's the begin with the end in mind.
Yes.
And so it's about being planful and mindful about what you do and how you do it. So that's why if it's intentional aggression, you're going to be thinking about what the strategy is. So hopefully people, and I'm glad you brought up the messaging, what we know about the media and how messaging works. Media messaging anything, if you say something over and over again and people start to internalize the message, they do start to drive the outcome. So it's super important for all of us to come up with some counter messaging and to realize how powerful those words are. So we can say, we don't have a choice, they keep anticipating, blah, 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 or we can be listening to a whole lot of really brilliant voices who are also doing work, who are saying to you, have a plan, be deliberative, have an outcome in mind, be organized, be focused, do this, do that. Think about what the destination is. Yes. At the end of the day, what are we trying to change? And when your anger is righteous, you know where you're trying to get to. That's right. You're like, I don't like policy X, and I want to make sure that policy X never happens again. That's right. And the way that the people who make that decision are X, Y, and Z, and I know that if we move those variables, I'm going to get there. Burning down my neighbor's store doesn't change policy X.
So the question I think we all have to ask ourselves, whether we're in Ferguson or not, is whatever my response to my righteous indignation is, will it get me closer to what I want or further away from what I want? And we start there when answering that question, which is beginning with the end in mind, right?
And I'm also aware, because, we do Sparks and we talk about this, so we do Sparks, which is an intervention to help build that logic chain that we're also talking about when we talk about youth and anger. Because actually I think Sparks is an intervention, it's a therapy model. It's called structured psychotherapy for adolescents with chronic stress. Hate the name. But what it does is it teaches young people particularly how to be, they call it wise mind, how to not be all emotional, how to not be reasonable and vanilla and numb, but how to take those feelings and thoughts and to do something, but also to teach you skills so that when you have a feeling, you can process it and it gives you some tools in your toolbox. But when I think about the world, that we have some kids who have skill deficits because people haven't modeled for them wise mind. What the world models for them, what unfortunately we as adults and the people around them, is a lot of emotional stuff. And we haven't put things in place because, I was thinking how many times were kids given permission to have a range of feelings, to express anger, to go home. I mean, how many kids could go home today and say, Mommy, I was really angry at you when you did blah, 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 and Mama would, and that'd be okay. And then all to do it to a teacher or to do it. And so we have kids who have a skill deficit in that area who have real needs. I mean, their anger is legit because they got some real hurts.
And it's beautiful when you see that in motion. I remember we have a set of family friends, and I remember when the daughter was 4 years old. They don't live here anymore. And I remember we were all over at their apartment, and we're doing something, and she gets really mad. And, she's not yelling at her father, but she's expressing her emotions. That makes me really angry. And she stomps out of the room. And she's 4. And just the way that progressed, where, he didn't, girl, you better get back here. He let her have her feelings. He gave her a few minutes, went after her, brought her back in, apologized in front of everyone for doing or saying anything that would make her feel that way. That's a revolution.
That's right. And it's so restorative.
That's where that was happening in all of our homes. Talk about African American mental health and wellness.
And community wellness. Because imagine to be able to speak truth to power. So, that's what they've been trying to create in Ferguson and other communities, is the ability for when institutional racism kind of runs amok, for people to say, hey, that hurt.
Yeah.
It's not a good policy, procedure, and practice. And for the people who are in power to go, ooh, we did wrong, and then how do we make it right? Or we did wrong in these areas, or that wasn't our intention, but we're going to commit ourselves to making it right, or even to having the dialogue. That's restorative.
Lets the steam out in such a powerful way, because you're actually telling people you're not crazy.
That's right.
We actually do need to look at this again.
That's right.
what that can do to people's sense of righteous indignation again. But what we're really after is this self-efficacy.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is not
Right.
which is much more than the question of self-esteem.
That's right.
Can you
So self-efficacy
two
is the ability to believe that you have power and control over your world, what happens to you, and you have agency. You have the ability to initiate change. Self-esteem is that sort of touchy-feely thing. I mixed feelings
feel
about
good
that
about
word.
myself.
I feel good about myself. I like myself. That's different than I believe that I have power and control over my world and what happens to me. And when I do exercise that, things can change.
Yes.
That moves mountains, right?
That's right.
And
That's what we're actually
that's what we're after.
Is this sense of self-efficacy. We got a call, and we got to get off in 3 minutes. Okay, hello, caller.
How you doing, Imani?
Hey, it's Martell. You done crying?
When y'all made that announcement with Ferguson,
Yeah.
for me that wasn't the right analysis, because when you look at the people of a policy, a practice, and then I think, now I just said, when white people think color is entitlement.
Yes,
So
yes.
That is a whole different situation in dealing with it, because they using our policy should be paid fairly, but they using it unequally.
So when that happens, Martell, when that happens, do you agree that many black people get angry? Even if they
Yeah.
can't say what it is, they know they're angry about something, right?
Yeah, they're angry, but you got another set of people that know what's going on.
That's
They
what
don't
we
make
said.
them angry because they feel like they. But skin color, it should be like an entitlement for them to be treated different than us.
Right, that's right. That's right. But what we want to get at, and what we want to get your response to, Martell, is what do you think? What do you anticipate will happen in Ferguson and in black communities across the country if and when the grand jury in Ferguson comes back with a not guilty verdict? What do you
Judgment item.
expect?
At first, it made me angry, but if they found him and charged him, they would probably keep it within the St. Louis area, Midwest area. For them not charging, it's going to make a ripple, like throwing a rock in the water.
Yeah.
It'll make a ripple effect all across America. And it probably, I believe it's going to wake up the young African-American man.
Okay.
And that's my feeling. I hate that I got that kind of feeling, but, if the guy works in mysterious ways.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. So you think this could be a wake-up call? What we don't want to happen, if it happens, it could be the wake-up call we've been waiting for.
Yeah, be the
I
wake
got
up,
you.
wait for sleeping giant.
I got you. Listen, we're glad you're listening in, and I'm getting the signal to wrap it up. But you keep listening and keep us on our toes here.
Okay, y'all stay safe and have a good day.
Okay, Karen. Last words.
Now I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish up.
So what we have tried to do today again is to unpack this idea of black anger, black rage, when and under what circumstances we might feel anger and rage, what happens when we externalize it, what happens when we internalize it, what does all that have to do with social policy, with the elections that we just had that made many people angry. What will we do with that anger? What will happen if the grand jury does not indict Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson? Will we see some repeat rebellions from the late 60s? Will we see something else? Will we see that this time has been spent well in terms of people organizing their anger, right? And make the anger instructional as opposed to reactive.
That's right.
You all remember Karen taught us this idea of anger being good when it can instruct us, and be bad when it makes us reactive. So that's one of the lessons for today. Stick with us throughout this series. We're going to make our way through anger to forgiveness to happiness and joy. Keep holding hands, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Access Live. Access Initiative is a trauma and justice-informed system of care. We're glad that you joined us today. Please join us every Wednesday at 2:00 p.m. for Access Live. Thank you and be well.